Hello, welcome to the interview here on France 24. Well, it doesn't really take a pessimist to conclude that, so far at least, Israel is having a pretty tough Arab Spring. Now, the popular revolts that we've seen rumbling across the Middle East have sort of laid waste to the rules of regional diplomacy, at least as we've known it in recent years. Heavyweight allies, such as Turkey and Egypt, that for decades stood by Israel often through thick and thin, are now having some second thoughts about that relationship. And in Turkey's case, they're really not even on speaking terms at the moment with Israel, so relations there at a bad pass. Now, Israel faces the prospect this week of a little further isolation as the Palestinians press at the UN for a bid to be granted statehood recognition. To discuss that and the other issues here with me today is Israel's ambassador to France, Yossi Gal. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. You are a busy man these days. I could pretty much guess that.
Indeed, I am.
And this week especially, a very busy week. Even though you're not physically at the United Nations, there's a lot up for stakes right now. At this hour, as of now, as we're doing this interview, the Palestinians are very much determined to press ahead with this bid. And you actually think that it's a formula for no good.
It is certainly a formula for no good. I think that the Palestinians will be mistaken if they continue with this initiative of theirs at the United Nations. The Palestinians must understand that there's no alternative whatsoever to direct face-to-face negotiations, sitting with the Israelis, putting everything on the table, and try to get something out of it. If the Palestinians think that somebody else will do the job for them, if the Palestinians think that somebody will impose a solution for them in the Middle East, they are mistaken.
But Mr. Ambassador, let me put this to you. If you were to play the devil's advocate, look at it from the Palestinian perspective, and they might say, we have tried everything. We were very patient. There was just the very minimal condition we had was to stop building these settlements. And it seems that Benjamin Netanyahu's government was just unable to meet that requirement. We've tried everything. This is our last desperate effort.
Well, that does not really correspond with reality. The fact is that the Palestinians have been avoiding for more than 2 years now, since the establishment of the government of Mr. Netanyahu, they've been avoiding a return to the negotiating table. And Israel, through this 2 years, has tried so many gestures in order to encourage the Palestinians to come to the table. We have tried everything, including putting a freeze, an unprecedented freeze on the settlements for 10 months just to bring them in. But
then began building again. There was that 10-month moratorium.
Well,
but then the construction began again.
The construction within the existing settlements, but the question is not that. The two sides should get back to the table without preconditions. The Palestinians have their concerns. The Israelis have their concerns also. We have security on top of our minds, but we have not put anything as a precondition. You cannot really try to fix the outcome of the negotiations before even getting to the table. If they have their concerns, we have our concerns. The only way to settle our differences is through negotiations face-to-face.
Let me ask you this. The opposition leader, Tzivi Livni, basically said, and she used these words, she said, the diplomatic stupidity, not my words, her words, of the current government of Benjamin Netanyahu is actually putting the United States in a very awkward position, forcing the United States right now also to be more isolated. Is there any way to change this whole dynamic right now?
Well, the only way to change the dynamic is really to have both parties go back to the table. That's the only place where there can be a positive outcome. I think that our friends, the Palestinians, are playing a dangerous game in raising the expectations of people, expectations on the ground that will not be met the day afterwards. And you know that we live in an area that is going through a very significant earthquake. I mean,
we'll get to that in 1 second, sure.
All throughout the Middle East, I think that they are putting at risk the excellent results on the ground in the West Bank when it comes to economic performance and security calm. And I think that what the Palestinians are doing is really runs counter to each and every agreement we have with them.
Do you fear that if this bid were to go forth, the vote were to take place at the General Assembly, do you fear that there would be an outbreak of violence? There have even been reports that there are extremist groups in Israel that are right now actually preparing for violent acts.
Well, I'm more concerned with extremist group on on the other side, and I am concerned with certain calls that I hear from certain Palestinian leaders on the Palestinians and on the Arabs to get out to the streets on that day. And I think that this is quite irresponsible on the part of these Palestinians.
Let's talk a little bit about Turkey right now. Last year, I interviewed the Turkish president for France 24, and I asked him whether or not there was going to be any apology, whether or not he would want an apology from Israel for the flotilla raid. And he made it pretty clear, yes. There's not been an apology since then. As a result, diplomatic relations have been broken. At least Turkey has, the Israeli ambassador is no longer there. Military ties have been cut off. This is the worst state that relations have been between Turkey and Israel in years and years and years. Pretty dangerous.
Well, we certainly hope that everybody will come back to their senses and that the situation calls for a responsible behavior on the part of everybody. You have probably noticed that the Israeli leadership has been relatively very quiet on this, and we really hope that we can...
You're hoping it will blow over. You're hoping that it will sort of maybe go away if you don't make too big a deal of it.
We have not broken diplomatic relations. There are embassies still in Ankara and in Tel Aviv. The level of representation was reduced, but we still hope and we think that the situation calls on the two sides to make their utmost in order to calm down the situation.
Turkey's foreign minister, Mr. Davutoglu, he has been speaking of the possibility of what he sees, he calls an axis of democracy in the region, notably between Turkey and Egypt. When you hear talk like that, what is your immediate reaction?
Well, listen, I think that the Middle East as a whole, from Tunisia to Yemen, from Libya to Syria, from Egypt to every place you look at, the Middle East is going through some very, very important historic changes. All of these changes at the origin have nothing to do with Israel, have nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict. As you well know, these things started as the outcry of the people in the street for a better situation. And we in Israel, of course, we would welcome more than anybody else the introduction of new values into the Middle East, the introduction of democracy in the Middle East. My dream is to wake up one day and to see that Israel is not the only democracy in this Middle East. But unfortunately, one has to be realistic enough to understand that there are enough extremist elements in our part of the world, from Iran to Hamas, Hezbollah, and others that will want to misuse and abuse and take advantage of this situation.
So there's obviously Iran always out there as a looming sort of unknown factor in the region, but much closer to you, Egypt. It's interesting, the Prime Minister of Egypt said in the past couple of days that the Camp David Accords, the pillar of Middle East peace for the past 3 decades, is not sacred.
Well, and I've heard so many statements from the Egyptian leadership about their commitment to keep the Camp David Accords and to keep the peace treaty with the Israelis. I think that it is in Israeli interest, it is in Egyptian interest, and it is in the interest of the region.
When you saw the attack on the Israeli embassy in Cairo earlier this month by a mob that broke onto the premises, what were you thinking then? Were you thinking just a bunch of extremists, this does not really represent the Egyptian population, or were you scared that this is a broader phenomenon?
Well, this was certainly dramatic for all of us in Israel to watch and to follow from up close. We are very pleased that the Egyptian authorities intervened, and our American friends helped as well to calm down the situation. But this is exactly what I meant when I said that there are enough extremist elements that will want to take advantage of the situation and these dramatic changes in our area.
France's Foreign Minister Alain Juppé told the United Nations earlier today, basically, that the current situation, getting back to the Palestinians, Israelis and Palestinians, cannot hold. It cannot continue this way. It would lead to violence. What have you said in your representations to the French government about what you're seeking to do?
Well, we certainly don't think that the situation can continue like this. We certainly believe that it is high time to return to the negotiating table, that it is high time for both the Palestinians and the Israelis to try and solve out the differences in a negotiating manner.
Final question I just want to ask you, is it incompatible necessarily? We assume that's one or the other. Could you have the UN vote for Palestinian statehood and return to the table and continue negotiations? Why can't you have both?
Well, you can't have both because Palestinian leaders declare openly that what they are after is really to pursue Israel in international tribunals. What they are after is to set up facts before they even get to the negotiating table.
So one of the fears is that if they were granted the statehood, that would give them the right to take Israel to the International Criminal Court.
I think that one thing must be clear. The question on the table is not an independent Palestinian state, yes or no. Israel has made its strategic choice more than 2 years ago when it's declared that it is going for the two-state solution. This is accepted by the vast majority of Israelis. This is accepted all over Europe. The Prime Minister of Israel said in his speech before the United States Congress that if a Palestinian state is a result of negotiations, Israel will be not the last, but the first to welcome it.
Yossi Gal, Israeli ambassador to France, we're going to have to leave it there. I appreciate you speaking to us today. A very busy week, a week at which the Palestinians are at the United Nations seeking a vote on a statehood recognition bid. Tough Arab Spring. We'll all be watching what comes next. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for watching the interview here on France 24.
Thank you.